And net income or after-tax, it's after-tax income, because after-tax income which is ys minus ts. So, the interpretation is that the intertemporal budget constraint stipulates that actually the present value of consumption must not be bigger than 1 plus RBT plus the present value of net income or after-tax income. Now, given that consumers want to consume as much as possible, this will never be smaller, so they go to the frontier, and so the present value of consumption equals the present value of income minus taxes plus the growth return on the initial NIIP. So B, we assume that beta 1 plus R equals 1. Now, explain why this implies a flat consumption path, that is Cs equals Ct for all s greater than t. Where does this come from? The Euler condition, right? So u prime Ct equals beta 1 plus R u prime Ct plus 1. So Ct equals Ct plus 1 if beta 1 equals 1. Okay, so that's of course an assumption, but it's a very useful assumption, and in fact, when people compute beta in steady state, then they take actually an average interest rate over a long time and say that is probably the empirically relevant measure of beta. So C is, now here we have that thing, we assume that the story. We assume that beta 0 equals 0. Through period 0, government spending is 0. At the beginning of period 0, the government announces that starting in period 1, it will permanently increase its spending to a level G greater than 0. And that's important, right? So there's an announcement. So show that consumption period 0 is given by the following expression. Does anybody have an idea how to do it? You want to do it? Super.
I think
Pardon?
I think all of us can do, but just I read.
That's very humble, but thank you. That's perfect. Only thing, well, it's important because you have to know that you start at here as 0. That's all perfect. So everything that you've written so far is perfect. Okay. Yeah. Only thing, may I correct one thing? That's minus. No worries. Exactly. Right. Okay, perfect. Super.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so that's that was very smooth and very fast, and so this is the key thing. Now, what can we say? Now, the important thing is to see that what happens to government spending in period 0. Nothing, right? What happens to consumption? It goes down. Why is that? Well, because the government spending shock is announced. Now, please note here in this model, the government is just yet someone taking away income from you and basically, I don't know, digging a hole and putting it away, right? So it's like a negative income shock. And given that the represented consumer is informed about the negative income shock one period in advance, he or she already reduces consumption in period 0. That's an important takeaway, that the consumption reaction does not take place when the negative income shock is there, but it takes place one period in advance. Good. So this is the big thing. Now show that the current account balance here at 0 is given by the following expression. This is the next thing. How would you compute the current account balance? Anybody have?
Just
So-
some.
Okay, so the red pen is not very good, so let's rather take a blue one. Right, okay, perfect. So, one thing I should have been more careful about, kind of the labeling. So, this is C, and this is, so you did, this is D. Okay, now the current account balance is the evolution of the net coincides with the change in the net international investment position at the beginning of period T and period T plus 1. So now this change coincides with income, net income, plus 1 plus R times the initial net international investment position minus C0. And what one did, she said, okay, in period 0, the represented consumer still gets the full income, but he already or she already reduced consumption, and so there's a current account surplus in period 0. So confronted with the fact that starting in period 1, his available income will go down, or her available income will come down, the represented consumer reduces consumption, but income hasn't been reduced yet, and so the current account balance goes up. So what about period? The next period, well, let me do that, because that's CA1 equals B2 minus B1, which is Y1 net plus 1 plus R B1 minus C1. Oops, there's a mistake. It should be R B1 minus C1. And this is an ugly B, so let me turn it into a nicer B, so here it is. Okay, so we have all the information. So this is Y minus G, because in period 1, the shock takes place. This is 1 over 1 plus R G, and this is equal to Y minus, what was it? 1 over 1 plus R G. So we have, so the current account balance in period 1 equals y minus g plus r over 1 plus r g minus y plus 1 over 1 plus r g. And guess what? This is 0. Because you have y minus y, and you have minus g, and here you have r over 1 plus r, you have 1 over 1 plus r, which makes g, right? And so you get a 0. So the current account balance in period 1 is 0, which implies that B2 is actually the same as before, namely 1 over 1 plus RG. So the representative consumer is running a current account surplus in period 0. And when the shock takes place, and I realized I should have taken on my microphone, sorry about that. So when the representative consumer, well, let me say it again. So the representative consumer is running, and the country is running a current account surplus in period 0, anticipating the negative income shock in period 1. Now, when the shock is there in period 1, then the current account balance is 0. Why? Well, because it's a permanent shock. There's no scope for for consumption smoothing anymore, right? There's no reason why there should be a current account surplus or a current account deficit, because everything is, remains the way it is. And so, so this was E, and F is provide an economic explanation. Provide an economic interpretation of the results in parts C to E. Explain in particular why the current account moves in period 0 before the increase in government spending actually takes place, and why the current account balance is 0 in period 1 and all subsequent periods. Well, let me finalize that. Period 0, the representative consumer increases savings in anticipation of the tax shock or the tax increase, which is like a negative income shock in period 1. So CA 0 is equal 0 S1 minus 0, right? And this is equal to 0 because there's no investment. Increases because S0 goes up. I say something on period 1 in a second. Let you copy that first. Well, period 1, now I really have to bend my knees. Period 1 since the income shock or the tax shocks is permanent, there's no scope for consumption smoothing. For consumption smoothing, and no need to increase or reduce savings. Reduce savings. Dot. Okay, so this is so please, when you prepare for the exam, make sure that you are able to handle the math. It's a few things that we did over and over again. You will realize when you go over the notes, you will see that, basically we always did the same thing. Max optimization, intertemporal optimization, especially in the first part when it was about the current account balance. Okay, let's move ahead. Okay, please make sure that you are able to handle the math, but also that you can explain what's going on. This is something that I find very important, right? It's not just about being able to handle the math. It's also important to explain the results, to interpret them, to communicate. I know that this requires another qualification, right? This is also about language skills. It's not that I'm not an English teacher, right? Don't worry about, right, the kind of exact grammar. Just make sure that what you write can be understood. Okay, so let me go into problem 2, and let me use the left-hand side for this. Problem 2. Now, the first question is a question that is very easy, probably will not take 2 minutes. Where do you find such data on Indonesia's financial account? IMF balance of payment statistics, right? That's all. There's people who don't know that the capital account is not the capital account, but the financial account, and people who don't even know where to find such data. And so it's important to train that. B, are the negative entries in the FDI column surprising? Justify your answer. So what do the negative, so when you look at Indonesia, and you see this is all in millions of US dollars. When you look at Indonesia, you see that this is always negative. So what does that mean? Negative numbers for FDI. What do they mean? Exactly. So FDI liabilities increasing by more than FDI assets, right? So that is more FDI coming into Indonesia. World Bank country code is IDN. IND is India, IDN is Indonesia. So is that surprising? No, why not?
Just like in Vietnam, because we are developing countries, so we receive a lot of FDI.
Right, exactly. Not surprising for let me say that EMDEs, right, emerging market developing economies. Now compute the balance on Indonesia's financial account for the year 2022. Well, that's actually that's really not rocket science. You just add minus 18,186, 68 plus 11,631, and then dot, 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 dot. And what's the last number? Plus 3,998. Which is, I did it before coming here. And the result is 13,033. Well, millions of US dollars. That's so. So in 2022, the financial account balance was positive. So what does the balance of payments suggest about the change in Indonesia's net international investment position, NIP, between the start and the end of 2022? It's easier than you think. Now, what is the financial account balance? It's delta assets minus delta liabilities. So, what is that? Well, actually, it's delta NIP. That's it. This number here is the number suggested by the balance of payments. So the balance of payments suggests that in 2022, Indonesia's NIIP has increased by 13,033 million US dollar. Because that's exactly what the financial account balance says. By how much did assets change, and by minus the change in liabilities, and that's just the change in the net international investment position. Now here's, at the end of 2022, at the end of 2021, the value of Indonesia's net external assets amounted to 431,017 million US dollar, while the value of external assets was 400 blah blah blah. Okay, here you have. Okay, let me. I have to understand my own question first, right? So assets. So end of 2021 was 431.17. Well, let me leave this out because I have an end of 2022 was 451,940. So the delta was, well, you have to subtract one thing from the other, was 20,923. Now, let me add that because I'll come back to it in a second. So, what about liabilities? Well, liabilities end of 2021 was 708,425, and end of 2022 was 702,086.